And it's my pleasure to introduce Susi Varvayanis, the director of the Broadening Experience in Scientific Training, yes, the BEST program. She is going to talk about innovative ideas for test driving your career. The floor is for you.
Thank you very much. So we're actually all about experiential learning. So we also kind of think of ourselves as building experiential skills for tomorrow. So we're going to get right to that. I'd like to have you find out what your needs are. I mean, usually people come to me with these kinds of things. We already saw presentation skills yesterday by your visual resources librarian. So hopefully you got some tips on that. But often people ask me about how to find jobs in their field of interest. How do they stand out among other PhD applicants? How do they get experience while they're doing their degree? Because all the positions they look at say they need work experience. And how do they create an elevator pitch or essentially sell themselves so that they can tailor their applications appropriately? So basically people want to know what's out there. How do I rule them in? Presentation skills, I just want to make a quick note that Itai Cohen is again teaching Finding Your Scientific Voice. It's a fabulous hands-on class to work your own presentation. It's not a lecture format where they say, make sure you speak slowly and don't turn your back to the, it's you are there videotaped, giving feedback to yourself and to others. You're working the visuals, you're working every single slide to include it as a core message into your presentation. So I highly recommend that course if you have time to take it. If you don't have time to take a full course, we're going to have a 2-day version of that in June through the BEST program. So, excuse me, so stay tuned for that. So most of these things that we're thinking about here boil down to networking. So I want to ask you, what does networking mean to you? Can somebody give an example? I have incentives for people who answer questions, so just so you know. Why would you network? Why is it important? One brave soul, come on.
Finding out things you don't know.
Good. Sharing information, yeah. Other reasons? Okay, we'll deal with questions on why not to network too, that a lot of people think they don't need to. Okay, and when I'm talking about networking, I'm not talking about this kind of networking. Okay, so employers look for networking skills. They want to see that you have interpersonal skills. Basically, can you hold a decent conversation? Can you spark interest? Are you going to collaborate with others in the department that you go to as an academic or within an industry group? And they want to know that you have some business savvy. So business savvy also means, are you going to look attractive enough so that students want to sign up for your classes? They want to join your lab? Or you know, can you create a startup budget for your new lab if you want to go into academia? Can you help grow projects? Can you convince a funding agency that your work is worth putting money into? And then if you're in the industry sector, you know, can you get repeat customers? Can you make money? Can you contribute to the bottom line? And don't think it's only publish or perish, sorry, librarians, but it's do or go, okay? If you don't bring in the overhead, the institution can't afford to keep your research going. So you need to know a little bit about the business side of science. And by the way, maybe you have some excuses as to why you don't want to do it. Maybe you're an introvert, or you feel like, well, I'm not very interesting. Why would they want to talk to me? Or maybe they're not very interesting. Why would I want to talk to them? And then it's like, well, how do I stay in touch? Even if I do make this wonderful contact, I just have these 50 business cards that I got at the last conference I went to. Now what do I do, right? Basically, you might not feel like you have time. And how do you stay in touch without being a pest, basically? So what I'd like to do is have you think about if networking is important, because it can be for finding out things you don't know, about finding new collaborators. It can help your research perspectives broaden. It can help you get a job. It can help you find out who the great professors are before you go to the institution and choose a lab. It might help you in many different ways. So if that's important, and we can get over these excuses on how, if you don't know how to do it, we'll develop right now, during this workshop, an elevator pitch. So an elevator is going up. The idea is that you have 30 seconds till it gets to its floor to make a connection with someone so that basically they want to learn more, okay? Same thing at a research conference. You're standing in front of your poster, 5,000 people are going to see it. Why is somebody going to stop at your poster? Why are they going to have an interaction with you and remember you compared to all those other 100 people they just met? So you should be developing a core message about who you are, what you do, why it's important. And it should be very short. It shouldn't be, well, I started work at my undergraduate institution thinking I wanted to do this. And then by the time you're getting to your current work, they've dozed off or gone for another cup of coffee, or you've lost them, right? So your message should go directly to what you want them to remember about you, because you have a short amount of time. And maybe scientists and engineers have a longer attention span, but frankly, I think we all scan quite a bit and we cue into things that might be of importance to us at the moment. So we hope to help you work on your performance skills, because it is a little bit of a performance, especially if you're naturally an introvert and you don't like talking about yourself, or you feel awkward having people kind of examine what you do. So we'll work on that. This elevator pitch, by the way, can then also be boiled down to maybe some keywords about your research for a publication, or a tagline for your LinkedIn profile. How many of you have a LinkedIn profile, by the way? Okay, so probably half to 3/4. What is your LinkedIn profile tagline? That's like the little thing that's right under your name. What is yours? Do you remember? Does it say PhD student at Cornell? That's pretty common. All right, but how does that differentiate you from all the other PhD students at Cornell, right? So I hope that you can work on some series of short, maybe 6 words or less, ideally, that describe what you do so that people will remember you when they then see your profile or meet you. So to increase the success, obviously you want to be respectful of people's time. Like, don't stand in front of the men's room and try and give your elevator pitch when somebody's trying to take a little break, right? Don't say, but wait, there's more, and pester somebody or follow them down a hall, or interrupt somebody that's obviously in a very detailed conversation with someone else about a particular topic. You might start by finding someone who's on the periphery of a room where they're kind of sitting alone, feeling kind of shy and wondering, like, what do I have to do to network? And you might start that way to get to know someone. And then we hope that you can use tools to increase your networking capabilities, like a professional organization in your field. We hope that you'll keep records of your outreach so you remember who you met, so that you can then follow up with them appropriately, where you can take notes and say, oh yes, I remember they're the organometallic chemist that has this particular catalyst that's really important that I might have some input on, all right? So we hope that you will show your passion. There's nothing wrong to be excited about the work you do. In fact, that human side should come through. You want to share that element of what makes you get up every morning and come into work and say, this is fabulous. Like, this is why I'm studying this. Now, I realize sometimes doing the PhD, you have some low moments. So maybe that would be good to channel that inner passion once in a while when you're in those low moments. So it's helpful for that as well. And when you meet with people, don't think that you're just asking them for help, because it's very likely that you can offer them solutions as well. Not all interactions should be one way. Networking is an interconnected web. So try and think how you can provide help to someone else, and then make it very easy for them to introduce you so that they can then be connected with someone else that maybe you know, right? Or they can introduce you. So always have maybe one sentence. You could practice it ahead of time, just have it ready. And don't have it full of jargon. Have it just be about your work in understandable terms. You could always go into more and more detail if you see them still nodding, okay? It has to be short, and you have to listen to what they're saying. It's better to say something very short and then wait for a question, and then you know what direction. Or ask them a question, and then you'll find out more information. So you know, well, they're not even interested in theoretical physics, so I'm not going to go there. I'll start here on a management tool that I'm using. So you can bridge to something that you have in common. So how many of you actually sat next to someone you don't know when you came in? Okay, very few, very few. So I want everybody to get up, and we're going to create some arbitrary groups. So let's say we're going to have the introverts gather here. We're going to have the extroverts gather down on that end. And the people who really don't know if they're an introvert or an extrovert, or they're kind of an ambivert, depending on the situation, they can go in the middle. All right? Quick, 30 seconds. And it's okay to pretend you're one or the other. For this exercise, it doesn't matter. Okay, everybody should be standing. All right, so in your group, the extroverts are feeling very lonely. Half of the extroverts pretend they're extroverts for today. From you down. Move down to the extrovert group. Okay? And from here on, we're going to be introverts. Okay? All right, so now find somebody you don't know and introduce yourself. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Go.
Hi. I'm Marisha.
Okay, everybody switch. The other person should be introducing themselves.
So right now I'm working on the problem.
Okay, let's stop. Who has a different way we can split up into 3 groups? What suggestions do we have? Categories.
What state we're from? What state we originally?
Okay, so the west is going to be out here. The east will be out here, and anybody in the middle or from a foreign country will be here. All right, and then we'll have to arbitrarily divide you.
Florida.
Oh, we don't have anybody from the west. Okay, how many internationals come from a Western international country? This comes down to how do we divide the map, right? Western Asia. Anybody? What is Western Asia? Trick question. Southern Asia. This way.
Susie, we could have also done birth months. That might have been.
All right, let's try that. Let's do birth months, okay? January through March. December back to August. And everybody else.
September. Okay, well, close.
All right, now, again, find somebody you do not know and have not talked to yet, and introduce yourself. 30 seconds.
I am Olivia. Science department. I work with materials for food packaging, like biodegradable, sustainable, active packaging.
Okay, switch to the other person.
Yes, yes. I work with proteins and carbohydrates. Yeah.
We have some classes here.
You are PhD student.
Okay, let's sit down. Everybody, back to your seat.
And what year? First year. Oh, where are you from? Not been the last person. Florida. Where'd you go for? Okay.
This is great. You know, you thought you were all introverts, but you're still talking. So let's sit down, and we'll do the next part.
I'm really bad, especially as I'm answering the age names that I have. Yeah, as well as I had because like.
I told you that because my name is very hard.
All right. Who was the first person you met? Andrew. Did you know Andrew before? Okay. Can you introduce him? That's okay.
Well, something that you said, an analogy really stood out to me, and I forget which part of it said that he parents more of a community-based environment, and it's kind of similar to when people get diseases and they spread it to others who kind of affect data in a similar way.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's very
Very good. Okay. Can you introduce your colleague?
Okay, so this is Pam. She's a postdoc in the linking of the department. Also, I'm afraid I don't have nearly as good as details.
Okay, so if I look
She's
at
from New Jersey, though. Most
Pam,
people I talk to from New Jersey.
Cornell, New Jersey, would that find you? Would I know anything about your research?
She is Pam Brady, though, so I
Wow,
can probably find
okay.
her specifically.
Okay. But how do I know if her research is of interest to me? That's going to be harder. Okay. How about you? Who's the first person you met?
My name is
Okay. Raise your hands who you work with. Okay.
and she works in biofield. She works on the reconnect the bones to the muscle.
All right. If I wanted to have someone that connects bones to muscles, I just look at Cornell and bone to muscle connection, and can I Google her? Would that find you? Maybe. Okay. It's pretty fun. So this is really hard. I mean, I'm putting you guys on the spot, right? Because that was 3 people ago, right? So how do you remember? And this is just a 5-minute exercise, right? When you're at a conference, you're meeting people like at lunch, and then you took, your plate to a table, and you met somebody else at the table, and then you went to a meeting and sat next to somebody. So how do you keep track of this, right? So if somebody, even though I gave you all these prompts and how to introduce yourself so that people can remember you, it's really hard to remember. So try to make it as easy as you can so that they have a name or, have a business card. Even if you're a grad student or a postdoc, you can have business cards. They're very cheap. Cornell is like $20 for a box of 200, or you can print your own if you want to change, what your tagline is every time, these Avery cut apart things look pretty professional. Use the Cornell brand, and that will help as well because people recognize Cornell. So the key to this is that you're going to have some difficulties trying to keep track of everyone. So if you can share a document or a link or a business card or something, that can act as a prompt for you to then get more information. So do you have more comfort introducing yourselves than you did before you started here? Yes or no? Yes. A little bit? Okay. So you don't have to be an extrovert to introduce yourself and have some fun. I mean, we saw a lot of smiles. I had a hard time getting you all back to your seats and getting you to stop talking. All right? That's because you guys were sharing your passion about what you're doing. You were laughing about incidentals. Maybe you stopped introducing yourself or just started chatting, and that's fine, right? That's how you get to know people. So what I'd like you to do now is to, the people who are vegetarians or who have dietary needs, they should congregate by the door and get their lunch first, and then everybody else should follow
They can
and
just get up
grab your lunch.
and go out right now with the lunch, because the lunch is out there. So go ahead if you have a special dietary need.
And then my slides aren't advancing anyway. So when you come back, sit next to someone you don't know and engage in conversation. So while you're still eating, it's really nice to hear all these conversations going on. I hope you're meeting people that you wouldn't necessarily talk to. I just want, by a show of hands, how many of you are thinking about a career that's not in academia? Your great hands are going up, even though your advisor's not looking. Do you feel like your advisor would support you in this decision? Yes or no? Excellent. Excellent. Even if you're not thinking about it. All right. So the BEST program is what I'm going to kind of concentrate on from here on out. And I hope that you'll stop me with any questions that you might have. And I promise not to move around too much. So you don't have to keep moving that. Okay. So the question is, why is there a BEST program to begin with? The orange line is the cumulative number of faculty positions since the early 90s. And the blue line is the cumulative number of PhDs awarded. Okay, this is just in the US. Now, this includes all PhDs, right? You guys either came here with a prestigious PhD and you're doing your postdoc here, or you're going to have a PhD from Cornell University. It's a Research One institution. So just like any statistics, you have to take this with a grain of salt. And to be honest, the actual numbers of PhDs at Cornell in physics, chemistry, chemical engineering, most physical sciences and engineering fields, about half of them are going into tenure track faculty positions. Okay? So we ask BEST program participants, so these are all people who say, I think I might want to go outside of academia. And we ask them, at the start of your PhD, what did you think you want to do? And at first I want you to just look at the gray lines, okay? So the gray lines mean that their career aspiration at the start of the PhD, whether they came here as a postdoc or they're in their first year or in their fifth year, most of them thought they wanted to become a tenure track faculty member or go into research or maybe some kind of government research lab and so on. And many of them, about 15%, are not really sure. And so now, during their PhD, it now might be 1 month later or 7 years later. Now we find that the biggest reduction is in those who think they want to still become tenure track faculty members, for whatever reasons those are. Many of the reasons that people tell me is they want to have a bigger impact of their work. They don't want just the 3 specialists to cite their paper 0.5 times over the lifetime of their paper, as Roald shared with us yesterday, right? Or maybe they've seen the role model of their advisor and they say, that's really not what I want to be doing. Or they say, I want to do the hands-on research. That's the fun stuff. And so they're going to go on to do that. Or maybe they have found an interest in another area. And what's interesting about this is that our participants increasingly find that other career things, entities, sectors like entrepreneurship, consulting, policy, communications, nonprofits, and many of them are still very much not sure about what they want to do after they've started their PhD at some point through. So the BEST program tries to help you explore the possibilities of what's out there, test drive them to see if it meshes with what you want to do, and then create some experience so that you can then write it on your resume to say, I've always been interested in science communication, and here's an op-ed that I wrote. Here's a blog that I contributed. Here's a mini review that I wrote, okay? So our program objectives are really to help increase the awareness of all the career possibilities so that you can make an informed decision as to where you're going. And you're not just going to sign up for a default postdoc because you haven't thought about what you want to do. All right, that's our goal, is that you're not just going through the motions, because that's very common. You get the research bug, you find it's fun, you just keep doing that, and people say, oh, you should go on for your PhD, and then you're like, okay, I'll just keep doing research, and then you're like, and now what am I going to do with that? So we want to kind of force that conversation so that you're actually thinking about what step you want to take after you leave Cornell. And then you can explore these possibilities through career panel discussions, discussions with alumni, some interactive sessions. You could do informational interviews with any best mentor that we have listed and many more that you could find on your own. We hope that you'll try to rule in or rule out. In fact, I would hope that you'd virtually try on 8 professions that you fail at before you leave, so that you will be successful at the one that you really love and that you're passionate about in the end. And you could try these on through interactions with various clubs. The CGCC is the Cornell Graduate Consulting Club. The ASAP is Advancing Science and Policy. So these are graduate student organizations, and the TEC is Technology Entrepreneurship at Cornell. These student-run organizations bring in speakers, do practice interviews, learn the day-to-day about what's involved in the professions around those areas. And they might do site visits. The Advancing Science and Policy group annually does a trip to Washington, D.C. to talk with lawmakers and see how policy is made and advocate for a research issue they're passionate about, etc. And then we hope that you'll create something that's meaningful to you, that's personalized to your interests. So we provide funding, we provide travel reimbursements, we provide registration, and we have you do a few requirements to get that money or referrals or resources, so that you learn how to pitch your idea, so that it's I need to have this to be able to make my next decision. And it's not just going to affect me, but I think there are probably 15 or 20 other people who are in the same boat who would also like to think about that. Or maybe I'd like to come back from that experience and share that with other people and say what I've learned from the experience. So our program is infinitely personalized to your needs. So we have events that we broadcast, but we don't expect you to come to all the events. We expect you to interact very selfishly with the program, so that you come only to those events that you think will help you in your future. And maybe you come to a few that, well, you just had a free time, so you came anyway, and then you learned about something that you hadn't thought about before. And so we hope that you'll reflect on your values and interests, so that you can find out what works for you and what will be the most effective way for you to move forward in your career. So our participants are all across campus. And in fact, we were funded for the first 5 years by the National Institutes of Health to focus on the biomedical careers, but we instantly went STEM-wide because we thought it was more important to cover more fields and be more inclusive. As of this November, we now are university-wide, and we're serving also the social sciences and humanities and arts fields. So we're going to be looking more and more towards integration of all these disciplines for the betterment of everybody's future careers. And so by the end of the time, when we look at our most active participants, the end number is 545, we see that at the start of their PhD, they're really familiar with about 30% of the 20 career paths that are relevant to scientists and engineers. And as they progress through their PhD, they're really familiar with an increasing number of these career paths. Maybe some they rejected out of hand because they never wanted to become a K through 12 teacher, and so they don't need to be more familiar with it. They knew it already. But what I'm trying to get at with this slide is to show that we hope to increase your knowledge of the different career paths where PhDs in science and engineering fields are really in demand and needed. So we hope that you'll test drive these various career options. And you can do that in many ways. Mostly grad students think about, oh, I need more training. I have to take another course. That is an option, and we do encourage you to do so, but we provide a little bit of assistance there. Cornell is unique in allowing graduate students and postdocs to be able to sit in on Johnson Graduate School of Management MBA level classes. This is a gem that you will not find at many institutions. However, we found after debriefing with the faculty who loved having these scientists and engineers in the class because they could basically teach the statistics portion and you show them a supply and demand curve and they get it instantly, whereas they were struggling with that with some of the MBA students. What happened is that the vocabulary wasn't there. You say, oh, just read this P&L. And everybody's like, I don't know what that is. It's a profit and loss statement. Okay, now I know what it is, but I still don't know how to read it, right? So we realized that there was this vocabulary gap for entrance into these classes. And so we developed a workshop called Business as a Second Language. So I had a question over lunch about, what if English isn't my native tongue? It's like, well, you know, Chinese isn't my native tongue either, and I'm going to Shanghai tomorrow, and I'm going to be totally lost, right? Speak slowly, get your point across, and keep practicing. There's a fabulous English language support office on campus that provides training exclusively for foreign nationals to improve your English, improve your writing of your papers. It's very discipline focused and is another gem that you can take advantage of if you're an international. But we provide a little bit of curation here again. There are 70 entrepreneurial courses that you could take, business and management courses across campus. But only 8 or 10 actually are open to PhDs and postdocs. So we curate that short list for you. And they're all relevant to what you might think about doing. They might be commercializing university inventions or ideation, try to come up with a new idea. Even if you never want to become an entrepreneur, it might guide how you look at your research. That business as a second language class actually is now called Business and Management Fundamentals, and it's taught every spring by Bob Cartman, who's an MD, entrepreneur, biomedical engineer, used to be a radio talk show host. This guy's amazing. And he's also an inventor. And so he brings a lot of great examples to the class so that you can learn these life skills rather than becoming a faculty member and then realizing that you never had any conflict management training and your lab members aren't getting along and you never learned how to negotiate with your chair and you took your first position without negotiating for your salary and benefits package. And so these skills are actually very applicable no matter what career you want to go into. We also facilitate certificates, either on campus or off campus. Many people have taken the Lean Six Sigma training, a Greenbelt certification that's hosted online out of Binghamton University. Others have taken technology ed online courses for biopharmaceutical regulatory affairs or quality control or lean processes and so on. And we hope that you will create something of an experience so that you can apply some of the skills that you want to work on. So for instance, if you're interested in communication, you might want to think about entering into the 3-minute thesis competition or try dancing your PhD and do a video submission. Now, maybe you're not that extroverted. We only had 1 or 2 in the room here, so that's probably not for you. But just thinking about it kind of makes you chuckle and makes you think differently about how you enact. In fact, Roald Hoffman gave a keynote speech one time where he pretended his computer wasn't working, and we had improv actors come up and perform his slides. It was very entertaining, and it turned communication on its head about visual representation of your work. We also encourage you to think about, many times people think, oh, I need work experience, therefore I need an internship. But I want you to think completely differently than a 12-week over the summer full-time internship that's going to basically not mesh with your research objectives. And so I'll come back to that in a little bit. What we're really trying to think about is a new paradigm for how PhDs are trained. Whereas in the past, you had your faculty mentor, who advised your research, and you gained technical training so that you got your PhD, and of course went on to a postdoc, and it was assumed you would take an academic position unless you fell by the wayside somewhere and found something else along the way by haphazardness. The BEST program really tries to incorporate your thoughts about your career development and professional development, and to put it on equal footing with your research objectives, so that next time you meet with your mentor, your advisor, you say, here are the 3 research objectives I have. And my 4th objective on the page is that I think I'd like to become a better mentor. Or I would like to work on an industry-related project. Or I would like to help write that data management plan because I want to become a better grant writer. Whatever that objective is, you should put it on the same page along with your specific aims of the research that you're undergoing. And then through these experiences and experiential learning opportunities, you can then decide whether or not a postdoc is what you want to do. Because if it's that you want to make more money, you probably shouldn't do a postdoc. There's a lot of research on this that's now published. And then you might think about going directly into the position that you want in whatever career path that you want. If you want to go into academia, very likely you need a postdoc. You probably will need 2, but think very carefully about what skills are you going to get during that postdoc that's going to set you apart from every other academic appointee. And as Roald said, start going to all those candidate talks. Those are the best talks on campus. So the BEST program is really in the business of making students realize their full potential. And that's not me saying that, that's a faculty member who actually said that. We're agnostic as to where you end up. And we center our efforts around what your needs are and when you're ready. So if you're about to sit for your A exam or Q exam, that's probably the wrong time to be attending lots of experiential development opportunities. If you have a grant deadline, that's your primary focus. Our program is here so that you can come when you have time, at a time when it suits your gaps, because that's when you're going to want to learn the most. So we hope that every activity, you can then write something on your resume to say, I've done that. Maybe after today, you're going to look at your LinkedIn tagline and improve it a little bit. That'll be the first iteration. Maybe your next introduction to somebody will be a little bit more clear, right? So a little bit at a time. And we don't say you have to dedicate hours and hours to this. On average, our participants spend maybe 5.5 hours in a year. That's not going to take you away from completing your PhD or postdoc training. We empower you, as I said, to create your own opportunities. And these are all things that people have already done. So we want you to sculpt your career into what you want to be doing. So back to these BESTernships. Kind of a corny name, but we didn't want everybody to think of a shadowing experience or an internship or an externship and get bogged down in the definitions. So anything is viable. And it might depend on your visa restrictions or on your appointment letter for your postdoctoral or visiting fellowship. So that's something you have to work out. But there are ways around almost every restriction there is. In fact, we've had people go for 5 hours a week. They were embedded within Cornell Environmental Health and Safety. They sat in on executive level meetings. They wrote guidance on reports. This one postdoc actually worked on all the bite reports incidents that happened on campus and developed training guides for how to remediate that statistic. Or you can go in within the biosafety analysis. We had a grad student and a postdoc both do that. They spent maybe 5 to 10 hours a week shadowing lab inspections. They learned about what it is like to be a biosafety officer. They both ended up deciding independently to apply for a very prestigious biosafety fellowship that's awarded to 1 to 2 people internationally every year. And they both happened to have gone through the primary screening and were invited to the in-person interview with a total of 9 people. They've never had 2 people from Cornell or from any institution at this. Then they met each other with their mentor and with me. We had a conversation about what to expect during that in-person interview. They found out that an interview for a biosafety specialist is very different than anything they had imagined. For instance, the first thing they do is they come in and they have to write an essay. Then they are given a presentation topic out of a hat that they have to spend 10 minutes to give a presentation like that without preparation. Then they have all sorts of case examples of moral and ethical decisions that they would have to make should they be a biosafety officer, and they have to come up with solutions. Then they have to communicate some horrible accident that happened, and the press is outside wondering what you're going to tell them. And you have to communicate what happened. Let's say it was a big fire in a BSL 4 facility. So huge security risk, infection capabilities, and you have to tell the public what happened. And one of them was put on a waiting list and then was declined for the fellowship, and she's going to apply again next year. And the other person actually got this fellowship and will be doing that next year. That's one example of somebody who translated something that you could do for 5 hours a week into their next step. It's a 2-year fellowship. Part didactic, part on the ground. You're actually a biosafety officer at an institution of your choice. People have been embedded within the licensing office who are interested more in the generation of new intellectual property, or they've spent time 2 days a week at a venture capital investment firm in Rochester. This required a lot more negotiation with her advisor, who at first said, I want you in the lab 24/7. And after the conversations and guidance on how to have these conversations, he said, you know, I can't say no. All right, so we give guidance on how to approach these conversations. For instance, if your advisor just got a grant rejected and a publication rejected, that's probably not the time to say, can I spend 3 months outside of the lab? So we work on that. Sounds obvious, but sometimes you have to pay attention to these things. So different people have done different things and created their own experiences. So I liken the career search process a little bit to the food pyramid. You know, everybody wants to go right to the fats and sweets, right? Because that's the fun stuff. You want to go right to what the comfort food is. But actually, if you haven't had a base of full grains and vegetables and a protein source, you know, cookies alone will not sustain us for the long term. So what we think is that maybe you should base it on understanding yourself. And so this involves knowing what your skills are, what your values are. Your values could be, I don't want to work for a defense contractor. Whether you do or not, that's your choice, right? Somebody else would say, oh, I love working for defense contractors because they get lots of money, right? And so your value might be, I could never live in a big city, or I need a family-friendly place of employment. So then what you do is, once you know these things, or for instance, I'm an introvert. So if 90% of your job is going to be on the phone, dealing with clients and traveling across the country, meeting with people, you're probably not going to be very happy. Likewise, if you're dying-the-wool extrovert, having a job where you're doing analysis in front of a computer in a basement somewhere is not going to make you happy. So there's no right or wrong. It just has to mesh with who you are and what's important to you. And the Cornell Career Services can help you with any kinds of assessments like this, with strengths finders, with personality, aptitudes, and so on. The next stage I see is kind of as exploration. So this is where you're kind of gathering information. It's like, oh, I have no idea that an intellectual property licensing executive at a university has to learn about all different aspects of the physical sciences. I mean, you heard from Martin Teschel earlier in this conference, or is he later? I don't remember where he is.
Yesterday.
Okay, yesterday. And so you learn that actually this is all of physical sciences and engineering, right? So if you're the kind of person who loves to read broadly, always has a stack of papers from all different journals on their desk, not necessarily related to what your research topic is, maybe that's something that you hadn't considered that might be actually kind of fun. But you have to learn the who, what, where, how do they operate, and you learn about this through talking with people. That's why this networking exercise was instrumental to what I wanted to teach you today, was because this is the basis for how you do informational interviews. What do you love about what you work on every day? What are the things you'd rather not ever do again? If there were a best of all worlds, what aspect of your job would you throw away? What are the bottlenecks in your workflow? These are the kinds of questions you can ask anybody. You can ask them when you're sitting next to them on the bus, in the lunchroom, on the side of the soccer field, wherever you happen to be. You can start asking these questions about people and their professions so that you can inform yourself about what bothers people and what resonates with you. And you might find that, oh, I'm a connector. I love seeing that you have a problem and you have a solution, and I'm going to put you two together. So these aspects of your personality might be revealed as you have these conversations and as you look at the websites of the employers that you might want to be going to. Just like you did when you chose Cornell, when you chose to come to Cornell. You probably didn't look only at one place. You did some comparison shopping. So the next stage is really the preparation. And so this is like, as you go through your job search strategy, you're going to be networking more. You're going to be kind of looking people up and seeing what they do, maybe checking out their CVs, their publication lists. You're going to look at the kinds of job descriptions. I mean, a academic position that says, you know, apply to the chemistry department with the project of your choice. And you might have another chemistry department says, we're looking for an inorganic guy who can work with, you know, whatever special thing that they do, right? They might have very specific requirements to that particular job advertisement. And so if you're the kind of person who likes a lot of structure, you're probably going to apply to this position. If you like the blank slate kind of look, then you're going to be gravitating more towards this position. It doesn't mean one is going to be better than the other. It's just that it meshes more with what you like to do. So you're going to be starting to look for good fits. At this point, you might be thinking about your teaching statement, your contribution to diversity, equity, and inclusion, a statement about your mentoring style. And this might be a time when you have conversations with your advisor and what's their mentoring philosophy? And how would you best like to be mentored? Because even though I might have a particular mentoring philosophy, it might mesh with you, but not with you, because you're two different people with different personalities. So the more you can share about how I like to be managed, the better you can have conversations and the better you can have an understanding of how the management can go on. So then this is where you kind of focus and think about the particular skills that you want to acquire or practice so that you're more fitting for a particular position. And then you go to the application. And I hope that you never will send out 200 resumes, because every single one of them is likely to end up in a circular file somewhere and nobody will look at them. I would rather you tailor 10 to 12 applications to the particular job that you're going to apply to, and you're going to convince them that you're the person that they have to hire. So what skills do you have? There's basically three kinds of skills. There's knowledge, so that's what you might acquire during your technical training here. And then there's the type of transferable skills that if you go into this position or that position, probably you're going to use them anyway, like analyzing a large amount of data and synthesizing it to create a decision tree or make a recommendation on what should be used or the next step. And then there are certain personal qualities that come out of your life experiences and are kind of innate to your personality. They can be worked on, and you should be made aware of what your strengths are in this area. For instance, let's just take the fact, let's say you're persistent. That's a super fantastic quality to have. If you have that superpower, go, because no matter what obstacle is in your way, you're going to churn through it, you're going to finish the project. However, every positive quality is probably also your most negative quality. So, that persistence, you're probably a pain in the neck, because every time I say no, you do it anyway. And so think about and become more aware of what your superpowers are and what the shadow side of that power might be, okay? And then you want to think about, like, what skills do I need? So you can look at the outcomes. I want to point you to the fact that the graduate school here at Cornell has doctoral alumni surveys that they've been doing since 2011. So yes, this is not like undergraduates who have been surveyed since time immemorial. So we're starting to learn where students are ending up. Cornell has decided to make this totally transparent and accessible to anybody. You can choose physical sciences. You can choose applied engineering physics and see where the alumni from those fields end up, and employer names and salary levels. And so it's all in-house. It's a growing database. So I also encourage you, when the graduate school asks you to fill out a survey, that you do so, because it will help future generations. And then talk to people, talk to people who are doing the job that you think you want and see what they like about it and what they don't. Ask your professors, like, what do you love about being a professor? What are the perks? What are the negative sides? And then use that to then follow others who are in similar career trajectories to see how they've felt about that. And then I want to really go through reading a position, but I just want to make a brief mention of the value of LinkedIn. So just by, even if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you could just go on LinkedIn and Google Cornell University. And right there, it will say, see alumni. There's a little blue button, just click on that. And then show more, and it will tell you where they work, what they do, and how they do it. So that is completely searchable with one or two keywords specific to your research, sometimes even just entering PhD. You will very quickly get that down to 6 people. And 6 people is not a lot of people to reach out to ask them about what they do. And so I encourage you to make a personal kind of goal to contact one person every month. Just start there. Somebody you don't know, just ask them about what they do. And then what you'll see very quickly is that as you build your connections, I just looked for data scientists that were in my connections. And these are all first connections of Cornell PhD graduates who are data scientists. You can contact every one of them right now. If you want to go into a data scientist position, they come from physics, biomedical engineering, computational sciences, and so on. Biomedical engineering. But the other thing of LinkedIn is that it will get you some business intelligence about the number of applicants, the skills they have, and whether that meshes with the skills you have, and links to similar jobs and information about the company. So that might inform a little bit more about whether you want to apply. If you already saw 550 applicants and you only had about 5 of the 50 skills that, that overlapped, maybe you don't want to waste your time, right? But one caution to women, please be like a man and apply to a position that you're only 80% qualified for, because they all do, right? So let's say I took just a random data scientist position that was on, I forget, Indeed.com, all right? So I want you to practice doing this. You take a position and immediately you're gonna be like, okay, what technical skills are they looking for, right? So you're gonna jump to that section. So take your green highlighter and highlight all those technical skills, all right? And then see like, oh, well, some of these I know about, and some of like, I've never even heard of that, right? And so you'll find out what, and this is a position that requires 10 years of experience. So what I'm saying is, you know, let's say someday you want to become president of the university. You're not going to go there instantly. What you want to find out is that, oh, they probably have to be dean on a chair and they were on faculty for many years. So you're trying to see what that progression is. So don't feel like you have to get these overnight, but it will give you an idea for the kinds of skills they're looking for. But then look at that position again, and maybe you've found a few that you feel confident that, you know, maybe you have some of those down there. And then look at what they're looking for as far as soft skills. So communication. Oh, they want you to be dynamic and have a can-do attitude. And they want you to have enthusiasm, curiosity, good social skills, and great verbal communication. Then put that yellow highlighter away and look again for the business skills they're looking at. And this is actually the whole job description. And it will reveal to you that maybe you should be thinking about other kinds of skills that maybe you hadn't considered before. So even the vocabulary, like go-to-market models, you know, they have all these corny terms in business that make it sound very catchy. Just like in technology, we have all sorts of cool terms that nobody else understands, right? So every profession has its jargon. But start to look at the kinds of things that you can map to for a particular position to see what it is that they're looking for. So I'd be remiss in not mentioning the graduate school framework for Pathways to Success if you haven't already been exposed to it. On the graduate school website, there is from soup to nuts guidance on how to navigate your academic position, how to build your skills, linking to events, and so on. Other resources I want to bring up is the career services. I mentioned the English Language Support Office, graduate and student life. We're very interested in you having a successful time at Cornell. And if you're having a depression, there are lots of resources on campus to help you through that. There are many resources to help you improve your teaching, if that's something you want to go into, or learning how to mentor better, and other resources, including the Office of Inclusion and Student Engagement, if you have a passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. So with that, I want to leave you with my contact information. Feel free to visit our website, join our Best LinkedIn group, and if you have a Twitter handle, that might be going too far in communications for the first time here, but feel free to follow us at Cornell Best. So I'm here to answer your questions and want to turn it over to you if you have any. Thank you for your time. as I said, I have incentives for questions. Is anybody interested in an industry career? We have this wonderful FDA guidebook. Now you have to ask the question.
I am curious about the certificate training that are available. How do we access those?
So the best way to start is to make an appointment. And then we walk you through, based on what you're interested in, how you can connect with those things. However, we have a lot of them linked on our website as well. So if you go to the industry tab, and it lists courses and opportunities, so you can walk through them. And we have lots of examples on our spotlight section to give examples of what people have done before. So the key places there would be technology ed and the Lean Six Sigma, or that baby, if you're interested. Other questions?
Have you like briefly characterized how much experience you've like developed with like one like particular framework? Like let's say you've been using it for a couple of years, but it wasn't your like main focus. It was like here, there.
Sure. If I asked you to do something with it, can you do it?
That's the thing. Like how quickly and like how efficient.
Okay, I need it by March. Okay, you just told me you know how to use it. That's all I need to know. Whether you have to learn it just before you use it, or if you're familiar enough that you're like the go-to person. So I might ask you questions like that, like, she's having a problem with that thing. Can you help her? Right? So that will help you judge. It's kind of like language proficiency. Like, are you professionally fluent? Is it your native tongue, or are you professionally fluency? Like, if I pitch you in Ecuador, could you now conduct all your research in Spanish? No, I'm not professionally. Do I have a working proficiency, or do I have an elementary college? So you can kind of rank yourself. If you're considered the expert, like everybody comes to you because everybody knows you do that so much better than everyone else, then you can say, I'm expert in that. But if it's like, I saw the manual lying on somebody's desk, I don't think you can claim that as something. So, and what career path are you thinking of?
I don't really know. I'm thinking about it.
Well, I suggest that you read Charting a Course for a Successful Research Career. Who else has a question? Who's thinking of doing a postdoc? Oh, nobody. Oh, one person. Okay, hang on. Start thinking of your question. We have this wonderful book. This is available online. It's by the Burroughs Wellcome Fund, a Howard Hughes Medical Institute publication. It's really sensational. It has huge detail. It's called Making the Right Moves, A Practical Guide to Scientific Management for Postdocs and New Faculty. Highly recommended. I mean, it has things like finding the right data management system for you. Then it has examples, questions you have to ask, and resources, and chapter 9 is on getting funded. So what's your question? So is it going to be in the same field that you're currently doing your research in? So do you know who your collaborators are at other institutions? Do you? Okay. So that's harder, right? I mean, it's easier and it's harder, right? Because you have many different fields that you could apply your work in. Do you have a preference for going down one or the other? Would you rather remain interdisciplinary?
So I like we're trying these simple things, but also apply my current research.
So typically what I say is that you should contact a research librarian because they're great at these kinds of searches. It's just like you do a literature search on a particular topic. You can find the people who are doing that kind of research. Or maybe you're thinking of a solution that they don't know that your skill could be applied towards their kinds of research avenues. But we can talk later. And the Office of Postdoctoral Studies, if you haven't visited, they help PhDs who are thinking about getting postdocs, as well as postdocs thinking about getting jobs. So that would be another resource. Make an appointment with Christine Holmes. And then think about the skills that are going to complement what you already know. Because you don't want to be taking a postdoc that's just repeating what you're already doing. Because that's not really additional training. All right, I'm getting the look. We have one more question. Oh, good. Wait, hang on. Let's see what else we have. Oh, are you interested in communication?
My question is that I know some postdocs, they can be flexible and find a job, but is it possible for people who go to industry then want to find a junior job or doing a postdoc? Can they do that, or it's like?
So it's a little bit field dependent, and it depends on what you want to do, right? So there are lots of people who go back and forth, or they're in industry and they actually have adjunct professorships at a nearby university. So you can do both. And so I would try to look at those kinds of people who do that. Look for somebody's career trajectory to go academia and then industry, and those who went industry and then academia. And so you can start searching for those kinds of people. And then ask them, how hard was it? Right? Did you feel like you came up? Right? You have to ask them if you have to jump. That's the best way. That's why I focus on that network. Because that's really going to get your questions answered. You have to talk to people. I think you also realize that I'm not in industry. I'm in Philadelphia 30 years. Right? So you need to help them interview, but we can help you connect with those people and find out where they are, what they're doing, based on your ideas. But you just received the scientist's guide to talking with the media. It's a practical advice from the Union of Concerned Scientists. So, congratulations. And now I will get out of here. Feel free to contact me if you have additional questions. Thank you.